All right, joining me more to discuss the legal, environmental, and business aspects of fracking, Daniel Simmons. He's a Director of Regulatory and State Affairs at the Institute of Energy Research here in Washington, D.C. From New York, Jannette Barth, an economist and Managing Director at Prepacton Institute. Both of you, thank you. Dan, let me start with you. Why did this fracking become so big in such a short period of time? Because as you mentioned earlier, it's been around for 60 years, but why in the last decade?
In the last decade, we've had, especially the last 5-6 years, we've had high gasoline prices. When oil is $100 a barrel, there is every incentive to go after oil. And plus, hydraulic fracturing, it costs more money to produce oil and natural gas through hydraulic fracturing than conventional technologies. But when you have high prices, that means people are going to go after it. And so as a result, we've seen this boom. So
you've got the high prices. Jannette, does this mean that this business is basically here to stay, despite all the controversial issues with health and the environment? It's here to stay for good?
Well, I hope not, because there are serious problems, both environmental and public health issues. And in addition, it seems that many people will say, oh, we're very concerned about the environmental issues and public health issues, but it will be great for the economy. Now, I am an economist. I have looked into the economic impact studies that have been done, and it certainly seems that all of the economic impact studies that come out with conclusions that it will be great for the economy, those studies were all funded by the gas industry. And when you look at independent and peer-reviewed research, that research concludes vastly different conclusions, such as counties with intensive resource development tend to be the most anemic growing counties. We know that gas-intensive counties in New York and in Texas over the long run have the lower levels of have higher levels of poverty, higher levels of unemployment, and lower growth rates in income.
Jannette,
yes.
let me bluntly ask you, what is the danger with fracking?
Well, there are a number of dangers. Environmental issues, the risk of contamination of water, air, and land, and the contamination can then lead to public health problems. There are tremendous costs associated with the public health problems, both in terms of mortality and morbidity. And then there are a number of other concerns, especially with regard to economic impact.
All right, let me ask Daniel to respond. Jannette brings up a number of big issues, and I've read about a lot of these in the research of doing it. Radium, chemicals, the wastewater, all these things are obviously bad for human consumption. Does she have a point when she says that this is too dangerous for us to be doing right now and there should be further research done?
Well, she has a point that we should always look at the costs and benefits of our activities, that we should make sure that how we're drilling for natural gas and drilling for oil is done in a safe, effective manner, because no one wants to live in a polluted world. No one wants to drink contaminated water. The reality of that is that hydraulic fracturing has not been shown to contaminate water. There's one confirmed study that has found that. It's been done in more than 1.2 million wells.
She made an interesting accusation, which is quite serious. She says that those who are regulating and doing these studies, those studies are essentially paid for by the gas industries. Is that true?
I mean, there are various studies that are paid for by, by the developers. That's surely the case. But when it comes to the environmental issues, we can look to the Environmental Protection Agency, the lead regulators in the United States, and the former administrator recently said, Lisa Jackson recently said, that there isn't any confirmed cases of groundwater contamination from hydraulic fracturing, and that it is possible to do it in a safe way. What matters is that there are the appropriate regulations. And I think around the country, by and large, we have those appropriate regulations in place so that we can extract the natural gas as well as oil and produce it in an environmentally sensitive manner.
Jannette, would you be happy if there were more regulations, or I suppose more regulations that were enforced? Would that solve some of your concerns?
Oh, it's way too premature to make a statement like that, because we have no comprehensive health impact assessment on this, on exploration and development of shale gas. We also have no comprehensive, unbiased economic assessment. So it's way too premature to even talk about regulations until we could do a proper assessment of both the health impacts and the economic impacts.
See, and you know, to respond to that, I'm not sure what that would be. I mean, we have been looking at, I mean, we've been drilling for oil for 100 years. We've been drilling for shale gas for the last, you know, only the 5-6 years. But the reality is that the process is generally the same. I'm not sure what those health impacts would be that are so different.
Sorry.
Jannette, this is a very complicated situation because you have the health issue, you have the business issue, you have the legal issue, you have the environmental issue, and we've barely gotten out of the box on the health issue. Before we run out of time, let me just ask, what is the cost to communities if we frack versus not fracking at all? Because the bottom line is they're already doing it right now.
Well, we know. Oh, are you asking me?
Go ahead, Jannette.
Yes. I've been looking a lot into this in New York and the public attitude in New York. We know that the opposition to fracking is growing, and there's more opposition to fracking in New York than there are people in favor of fracking based on the most recent polls. We also know that the people are concerned about the local communities right by the shale where the drilling will take place, because we have seen in communities in Pennsylvania and in North Dakota and in Colorado, we have not only seen contamination of water, we know about near compressor stations, for example, benzene in the air. Benzene is a known carcinogen. We know that roads have been damaged to the extent of like $2 billion to repair roads in Texas that have been damaged by the fracking industry. $400 million in Arkansas, road damage only to state roads. That doesn't include county and local roads.
Jannette, let me get Daniel in on the last word here. We're almost out of time. I do want you to comment on whether or not this is good for cities, but also it's banned in a lot of places, including France.
Well, if you look at a place like North Dakota has the lowest unemployment in the United States. In large measure, that's because of hydraulic fracturing. It is a great jobs generator. Every day, the oil and gas industry produces $1 billion of economic activity. There are downsides. I mean, that does mean that people are driving trucks, and that can harm roads. But it's giving, you know, the oil and gas industry pays $85 million in taxes a day to compensate for that. And the reality is that, you know, economic growth does have some downsides in some circumstances. That's the truth. But it's a heck of a lot better to be getting oil and gas, developing it here in America than getting it from overseas or from the Middle East.
All right. Jannette Barth joining us from New York, Daniel Simmons here in Washington, D.C. Thank you very much. And a very controversial topic, but you're helping us understand it a little better.